San Isidro, Texas, late October, the air thick with mesquite smoke and the last heat of the year. At dusk, in front of the little mission-style church called Our Lady of the Fields, Reverend Lucas Harlan Brooks raises a 12-pound sledgehammer above his head and brings it down with all the fury of 20 years of sermons. The 80-year-old plaster statue of the Virgin Mary, crowned, blue-mantled, hands open in gentle welcome, explodes into white dust and broken pieces while hundreds of townspeople fall to their knees sobbing. Yet 24 hours later, from those very shards, with no soil and no water, perfect red roses begin to bloom, and the man who swung the hammer will soon be found weeping among them, begging the mother he tried to destroy to forgive him. Before we continue, share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary have reached. And if you haven't yet joined our family, subscribe now, because here, each day, we witness the tender love and mighty power of the Mother of God. Lucas Harlan Brooks had arrived in San Isidro 10 years earlier with a U-Haul full of sound equipment, a young wife named Abigail, and a fire in his belly that made people listen. He started First Bethel Assembly in a metal warehouse on the edge of town, and within 5 years the warehouse was too small. He bought the old movie theater on Main, painted the marquee, where the Word is alive, and filled every seat on Sunday morning and Wednesday night. People drove from Laredo and Zapata just to hear him preach. He had that kind of voice, deep South Texas drawl wrapped around scripture like barbed wire around a fence post. When he spoke, sinners trembled, backsliders came home, and offering plates overflowed. He was handsome in the way small-town preachers sometimes are, tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair just beginning to silver at the temples, eyes the color of a storm about to break. Abigail sang beside him in perfect harmony, their two little girls in matching dresses waving from the front row. On the surface, everything shone, but beneath the shine ran a current of zeal that grew sharper every year. Lucas had been raised on the King James and the idea that anything that smelled Catholic was a one-way ticket to idolatry. He could quote the Second Commandment faster than most priests could find their breviary. He kept a shelf of Jack Chick tracts in the church foyer and handed them out like candy on Halloween. Every May, when the Catholic side of town crowned their Virgin with roses and carried her through the streets in a candlelight procession, Lucas held a counter-event called Christ Alone Revival, complete with banners that read in "O Queen in Heaven, but Jesus on the throne." San Isidro had always been a town of two hearts beating side by side. On one side, the old families who traced their roots to the Canary Islanders and the Mexican ranchos, who baptized babies at Our Lady of the Fields, danced Madashines at the Feast of Guadalupe, and left fresh flowers every single day at the feet of the plaster statue that had stood in the courtyard since 1942. That statue had been blessed by the bishop himself, crowned with real gold in 1962, and carried through floods and droughts and every sorrow the border had ever known. Old women swore it had wept real tears during the Great Freeze of '89. Children left crayons and lollipops in its folded hands. It was not just plaster to them. It was their mother who never left. Lucas saw only idolatry. And in the spring of that year, when the town council voted to give the Catholic parish a small grant to restore the statue's fading paint, something inside him snapped. He declared open war. He called it Idolatry Awareness Week. Every night for 7 nights he preached until the rafters shook. Graven images, golden calves in modern dress. Mary is asleep in the grave. Friends, she cannot hear you. He printed 10,000 flyers with a picture of the statue and a giant red X across her face. He parked his truck outside the mission and blasted sermons from loudspeakers while little grandmothers crossed themselves and hurried past. Then, on the final night, he announced the unthinkable. Tomorrow, he thundered, sweat flying from his brow. I will take a sledgehammer to that idol myself, right on their own church ground, in broad daylight. so the whole town can see the truth set them free. The Catholic parish prayed all night. Father Miguel Angel Herrera, a gentle man with silver hair and hands that had baptized half the town, stood on the steps at dawn and begged Lucas to reconsider. But Lucas was past listening. He believed he was about to do the greatest work of his ministry. He did not yet know he was about to meet a mother who refuses to be broken. Saturday, October 28th, just after the sun slipped behind the mesquite, the sky still bleeding orange and violet. The courtyard of Our Lady of the Fields was already full, not with celebration, but with mourning. Hundreds of townspeople stood shoulder to shoulder, candles flickering in brown hands, rosaries wound tight around knuckles, silent tears catching the light. Children sat on their father's shoulders so they could see the statue one last time. Old men who had carried it in procession for 70 years clutched their hats against their chests, as though the Virgin herself might feel the evening breeze. Before we continue, share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary have reached. And if you haven't yet joined our family, subscribe now, because here, each day, we witness the tender love and mighty power of the Mother of God. At 7:12 p.m., the rumble of pickups rolled in like thunder. Lucas Harlan Brooks stepped out of his black Silverado, clutching a sledgehammer across his shoulder the way David once carried Goliath's sword. Behind him poured 200 of his members, many holding phones aloft to live stream the liberation. They sang, "To God be the glory," at the top of their lungs while the Catholic crowd answered with the soft, steady murmur of the Hail Mary in Spanish. Two rivers of prayer colliding in the Texas dust. Father Miguel Angel Herrera walked forward alone, brown Franciscan habit brushing the caliche, hands open in supplication. "Reverend Brooks," he called, voice trembling but clear. "This statue is the grandmother of half this town. It has heard their confessions when no priest was near, dried their tears in drought and war. Please, brother, for the love of Jesus whose mother she is, leave her in peace." Lucas's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Peace? This thing has kept these people in chains for 80 years. Tonight the chains come off." He pushed past the priest, past the ring of weeping women, and stood before the statue. The Virgin looked exactly as she always had, serene, a little faded, mantle chipped by decades of sun, but her painted eyes still gentle, still watching over the courtyard the way a mother watches a sleeping child. Lucas raised the hammer. The live stream chat exploded with fire emojis and crying faces. The first blow took her crowned head clean from her shoulders. Plaster exploded outward like white shrapnel. A collective scream rose from the Catholic side. Raw, animal, centuries of tenderness shattered in a single swing. The second blow severed her arms. The folded hands that had received thousands of baby shoes and love notes fell to the ground and broke into pieces. The third blow cracked her heart in two. The crown, real gold leaf over tin, rolled across the dirt and came to rest against the sandal of an 8-year-old girl who had been named after her, Maria Guadalupe. Lucas stood panting over the ruin, sweat shining on his forehead, hammer hanging at his side. He turned to the cameras, triumphant. "There, the idol is dead. Now maybe these people can meet the living Christ." But something was already happening that no one expected. From the broken chest of the statue, where the hammer had split the plaster wide open, a thin line of red appeared. At first people thought it was paint. Then it began to flow, slow, steady, unmistakably liquid, dripping down the white fragments and pooling in the dust. Someone whispered, "Sangre," another voice, louder, "It's bleeding." Phones swung toward the ruin. The live stream chat froze, then filled with question marks and weeping emojis. A woman near the front fainted. Father Miguel dropped to his knees in the dirt, crossing himself over and over. Even some of Lucas's own members stepped back, faces pale. Lucas stared at the red spreading across the ground, the hammer suddenly heavy in his grip. He opened his mouth to explain it away. Old paint, a trick, condensation, anything, but no sound came. For one heartbeat, the courtyard was perfectly silent except for the drip, drip, drip of something that looked and moved exactly like blood. Then Lucas threw the hammer into the bed of his truck, climbed behind the wheel, and tore out of the courtyard, tires spitting caliche like accusations. Behind him, the Catholic townspeople fell to their knees among the broken pieces, touching the red liquid to their foreheads, weeping and praying as though the statue were not destroyed, but giving birth. Lucas drove home convinced he had won a great victory. By morning, the entire town would know he had only begun a war he could not win. Dawn came soft and peach-colored over San Isidro, the kind of quiet Sunday light that usually found grandmothers walking to 6 o'clock mass with mantillas on their heads and coffee steam curling from styrofoam cups. But on this morning, the streets were already full. Word had traveled by text, by whispered phone calls, by teenagers running barefoot from house to house. Something was happening at Our Lady of the Fields. Before we continue, share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary have reached. And if you haven't yet joined our family, subscribe now, because here, each day, we witness the tender love and mighty power of the Mother of God. By 7:30 the courtyard was packed again, but now with wonder instead of grief. Where the broken statue had lain in white rubble the night before, perfect long-stemmed roses, deep blood red, velvet soft, heavy with dew, had pushed straight through the plaster fragments. Not one or two, but dozens, then hundreds, blooming in impossible clusters with no soil beneath them, no roots visible, only the jagged edges of yesterday's destruction cradling the living flowers like a shattered heart giving birth to beauty. The fragrance rolled out in waves so powerful that people blocks away opened their windows and asked, "Who's burning roses?" Father Miguel Angel arrived still in his pajamas under his cassock, eyes wide as a child's. He fell to his knees in the dirt and simply stared. An old woman named Dona Lupe, who had been coming to that statue every morning since 1953, reached out a trembling hand and touched a petal. It was warm, alive, trembling slightly as if breathing. She brought her fingers to her lips and began to sob. Within minutes, the entire courtyard was on its knees, rosaries moving faster than tears could fall. Someone laid a phone on the ground and started live streaming. Within an hour, the video had 1 million views. Reporters from Corpus Christi and San Antonio raced down Highway 83. By noon, the sheriff had to close the street. Pickup trucks lined the ditches for half a mile. Across town, Lucas Harlan Brooks woke to an empty house. Abigail had taken the girls to her mother's at sunrise without a word. His phone was exploding with messages from church members. "Pastor, have you seen the roses? Pastor, you need to come. Pastor, I'm scared." He turned on the local news and there it was. Drone footage of the courtyard carpeted in red. A reporter almost whispering. Scientists are baffled. There is no botanical explanation. The stems are growing directly out of solid plaster. Lucas felt his stomach drop. He told himself it was a hoax, Catholic trickery, food coloring, mirrors, anything. But when he drove past the church, meaning only to prove it false, he saw the parking lot overflowing, saw people he had baptized himself kneeling among the roses, saw grown men weeping openly. He kept driving, hands shaking on the wheel. That afternoon, Abigail went alone. She stood at the edge of the crowd, clutching her purse like a life raft. A little girl handed her a single rose plucked from the rubble. The moment Abigail touched it, she began to cry so hard her knees gave way. She stayed until sunset, kneeling among strangers who felt like family, breathing in the fragrance until her clothes carried it home. When she walked through the door that evening, Lucas was sitting in the dark living room, television muted on endless footage of the courtyard. She laid the rose on the coffee table between them. Its scent filled the entire house. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say with words. Outside, the roses kept blooming. By nightfall, the pile of broken plaster had become a living garden. Red against white like wounds turned into resurrection. And somewhere in the perfumed dark, a mother who had been broken by human hands began to gather her children again, one trembling heart at a time. The roses did not stop. They multiplied through November, through Advent, through the coldest nights the valley had seen in years. Each dawn revealed more. Velvet crimson blooms pushing through every crack in the shattered plaster. Some with stems 2 feet long, others tiny buds opening like secrets. People came from Houston, from Monterey, from as far as Chicago. They brought the sick in wheelchairs, the dying on stretchers, babies with fevers wrapped in blankets. They touched the roses too. Foreheads, pressed petals to lips, tucked stems behind ears, and they left healed. A boy from Brownsville blind from birth saw light for the first time. A woman with stage 4 cancer felt the tumor shrink beneath the doctor's hands the very next week. The scent never faded. It clung to clothes, to car seats, to rosaries carried home in trembling fingers. Before we continue, share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary have reached. And if you haven't yet joined our family, subscribe now, because here, each day, we witness the tender love and mighty power of the Mother of God. Across town, First Bethel Assembly became a ghost building. The marquee still read, "Where the Word is alive," but the parking lot stayed empty on Sunday mornings. The radio station canceled Lucas's program for the time being. Offering envelopes returned unopened with notes that said, "We love you, Pastor, but we have to see for ourselves." His own deacon stopped answering his calls that night. He walked the silent aisles of the converted movie theater, past rows of empty seats that once shook with amens, and felt the weight of a kingdom he had built with his own hands crumbling into dust. His body began to follow. First the headaches, then the tremors in his left hand, then the nights he woke gasping for air as though something heavy sat on his chest. The doctor in Laredo spoke the words stress-induced arrhythmia and prescribed pills Lucas never filled. That he knew what was happening. He had preached for years about Pharaoh's hardened heart. Now he lived inside one. That Abigail begged him to go see the roses, just once, just to look. That he refused. He locked himself in his study with the blinds drawn and tried to write a sermon that would explain everything away. But every page ended soaked with tears he could not stop. On the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, December 8th, the bishop arrived from Corpus Christi. He celebrated Mass in the courtyard itself, a temporary altar draped in white, thousands kneeling among the roses while television helicopters circled overhead. The consecration of the fragrance grew so strong that pilots later swore their cockpits filled with it at 2,000 feet. That night Lucas could not sleep. The house smelled of roses though every window was closed. At 2:17 a.m., he found himself in his truck, driving the familiar roads on autopilot, past the darkened Ticarius and the blinking yellow light at the intersection, until he was parked across the street from the courtyard that now glowed under floodlights. The gates were locked, but the low adobe wall was easy to climb. He slipped over like a thief and walked alone among the flowers that had grown out of his violence. He fell to his knees in the dirt. The roses brushed his face like gentle hands. Their scent was unbearable. Mercy, he reached out and touched a broken piece of the statue's face, still recognizable, still serene, and felt warm wetness on his fingers. When he lifted them to the floodlight, he saw they were streaked with red. Not paint, not trickery, fresh blood, warm as life, mingling with the dew on the petals. Something inside the man who had once lifted a hammer against heaven finally shattered. He pressed his forehead to the ground and sobbed the way only a Texan man sobs when he has nowhere left to be. Strong, he cried for every sermon that wounded, every flyer that mocked, Every heart he had taught to fear the mother Jesus loved, that he cried until his shirt was soaked and the dirt beneath him turned to mud with his tears. And in that moment, among the roses that refused to hate him, he heard her, not with ears, but with the sudden, unmistakable certainty that a mother feels when her child finally comes home after years of running. In words, only love, vast and tender and unbreakable, pouring over the ruins of his pride like baptismal water. When the sun rose, Father Miguel Angel found him there asleep on the ground, cheek against a rose, cheek streaked with blood and tears and peace. The priest did not wake him. He simply covered him with his own coat and sat nearby to guard the prodigal who had finally stopped fighting. 3 days later, on a Sunday morning when the sun rose red over the thorn scrub, Lucas Harlan Brooks walked into the packed courtyard of Our Lady of the Fields carrying no Bible, no hammer, only a single white rose he had picked from the ruins himself. He was unshaven, eyes swollen from crying, shirt wrinkled from sleeping on the ground, yet every person there recognized him instantly. A hush fell so complete you could hear the bees moving among the miraculous blooms. Before we continue, share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary have reached. And if you haven't yet joined our family, subscribe now, because here, each day, we witness the tender love and mighty power of the Mother of God. Father Miguel Angel was in the middle of the rosary when he saw him. He stopped mid-Hail Mary, made the sign of the cross, and opened his arms. Lucas walked straight into them and buried his face in the priest's shoulder like a child finally home from war. The entire courtyard watched the man who had shattered their mother now clinging to their priest, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Then, without letting go, Lucas turned to the thousands gathered and spoke the words no one thought they would ever hear from his mouth. "Forgive me," he said, voice raw, cracking across the microphone someone thrust toward him. "I came here to destroy what I did not understand. I hurt you. I hurt her. I hurt the Mother Jesus gave us from the cross. I was wrong. God have mercy on me. I was wrong." A sound rose from the crowd, not anger, not triumph, but the deep, collective release of breath held for months. Old women who had cursed his name now blessed him through tears. Teenagers who had thrown rocks at his truck now reached out to touch his sleeve as he passed. Someone began to sing Salve Regina. Within seconds, 10,000 voices carried it to the sky. That afternoon, Lucas gave his first interview, not to defend himself, but to confess. He sat on the courthouse steps with every news camera in South Texas pointed at him and told the truth. How pride had dressed itself as zeal, how fear had masqueraded as doctrine, how the scent of roses had followed him into every room until he could not breathe without inhaling mercy. He announced he was closing First Bethel Assembly and giving the building to the diocese for a perpetual adoration chapel. He asked, on live television, to be received into the Catholic Church. The following December 12th, Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, the cathedral in Brownsville overflowed. Lucas, Abigail, and their 2 daughters, dressed in white like first communicants, walked down the aisle while the choir sang Las Mananitas at dawn. The bishop himself confirmed them. When he anointed Lucas's forehead with sacred chrism, the former pastor closed his eyes and wept openly as the oil ran down like the tears he no longer needed to hide. Today, if you drive to San Isidro, you will find a new shrine on the exact spot where the statue was destroyed. A life-size bronze virgin now stands with arms open, but at her feet the original broken plaster is preserved under glass and from the cracks, exactly as they were that first morning. Living roses still bloom every single year, red against white, a heart broken and made whole. Pilgrims leave cowboy hats, baby shoes, wedding rings, photographs of prisoners and soldiers. The shrine is called Nuestra Señora de las Rosas que no se rindió, Our Lady of the Roses who would not give up. And every evening at sunset you will find a tall Texan man with silver in his hair kneeling there. rosary moving slowly through calloused fingers that once held a hammer. He no longer preaches against Mary. He simply whispers, over and over, the prayer he once forbade anyone to pray in his presence. Hail Mary, full of grace, pray for me, a sinner, now and at the hour of my death. Write the word roses in the comments if this story cracked open something inside you. If it reminded you that the Mother of God can turn even the hardest heart into a garden. Let's see how many of us tonight are breathing in that same undefeated fragrance. May Our Lady of the Roses, who would not give up, wrap you and everyone you love in her unbreakable, bleeding, blooming love tonight and forever.